For years to come, our 20 years of war in Afghanistan will be hotly debated. Even though our presence there and the withdrawal was planned and called for by leaders from across the political spectrum and by both Democratic and Republican administrations, we have seen this event used and it'll continue to be used as political fodder. Now, there are plenty of questions to debate, but for me, one of the most fascinating aspects of that war was a perspective shared by many people in the military, soldiers on the ground as well as their commanders. Their perspective is that while the United States possessed overwhelming superiority in technology and weaponry, there was, at best, the lack of a clear and consistent strategy and a lack of consistent tactics to carry out any strategy. Mostly, what these military men and women wanted to know was this: what is the point? Why are we here? There's a difference between strategy and tactics. A strategy is the big picture plan of what you want to achieve. It's a set of goals, and in general, how you plan to achieve them. It's the end game, it's the final result that you envision. And the strategy itself serves a larger purpose. Usually it's in service of a mission or a cause or an ideal. Tactics are simply the specific, concrete, smaller steps you take to accomplish your strategy. So, one of the lessons we can all take away from Afghanistan is that if the government of the United States, in all its might and with all the experts at its disposal, could not clarify in 20 years' time a clear and consistent strategy or tactics to carry out that strategy, then the same thing could happen to anybody and to any organization. Let's say I want to write a novel. I picture my name on the New York Times bestseller list. My mission is to be a best selling novelist. That means my strategy is to write a novel that I believe will be a bestseller. So not only is it a creative pursuit to write, the kind of novel I write is very, very important. I need to ask, will it appeal to a big audience? Will it be a mystery novel, a romance, a spy thriller? Do I use a classic storyline like, let's say, the Cinderella story? Because thousands of books have followed that basic plot structure. So that's strategy. Then I get down to tactics. After all, I've actually got to write this thing. So what time of day am I going to write, and for how long? Do I wake up early to write, or do I stay up late? Do I write 7 days a week, or do I take weekends off? And when I finally finish my great American novel, that's it's a mystery romance about spies based on the Cinderella story. Well, where am I going to find an agent? How am I going to convince a publisher to read this thing? And assuming it gets published, how am I going to market this book? It's not going to sell itself. All of that is tactics. So it's important to know the difference between strategy and tactics, mostly because tactics can feel more exciting and more immediate. Plenty of people will open a retail store, for instance, and get caught up in how they decorate the windows to draw in their customers. Meanwhile, their strategy, well, it's kind of mushy. So let's say I want to sell funny socks, socks that have clever sayings on them or that come in all kinds of crazy designs. You've seen those. Because I love socks like that, and I'm convinced that everyone else loves them too. The great thing is, I can pursue my passion for sharing the joy of funny socks and make money at the same time. That's my strategy. But have I taken into account where my storefront is located, or that most socks are now sold online and cheaper than what I can sell them for? But I tell myself, no worries. When people walk by and they see all those great socks in the window, which is my tactic, the strategy will just work itself out like a charm. Probably not. We make the same mistakes in our personal relationships. So let's say I'm married, which I am. What's my mission in life as a married guy? What's my strategy? Well, it's to make Ellen happy. Of course, I really can't make Ellen happy any more than I can make her eyes brown. Not that I would want to. I love her eyes just the way they are. What I mean is, her happiness is certainly an outcome I want. But if I were to pursue that by buying her flowers every day, or by giving her a gold necklace every Christmas,
Okay.
or by massaging her feet every evening,
Okay.
would that really make her happy?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably would. Anyway, but those are just tactics. Because if I otherwise acted like an uncaring jerk and never listened to her or never took her seriously, or I failed to support her, or I failed to cheer her on in her own pursuits, then no amount of flowers or necklaces or foot massages would ever make her happy. Well, I mean, they might temporarily. Anyway, I need to approach my relationship with my wife with a mission in mind, with a strategy. My mission and my purpose and my cause is to have a great relationship with her because I love her. I'm not here to make her, or anyone else for that matter, happy. I'm here to foster a great relationship with her because having a great relationship brings great happiness. So I try very hard to think of her needs before my own needs. I ask myself, now, does this decision reflect how I feel about her and honor her feelings? Is she going to be happy that I went out and just bought myself a new convertible without first consulting her?
No, no.
Yeah, it's doubtful. Well, okay, then, that's not a sound strategy. It needs to be consistently aimed at having a great, loving relationship. And the tactics that arise from that strategy, those are the details. The tactics are things that'll come naturally if I stick to my strategy because I'll think about expressing that strategy with flowers and necklaces and foot massages. And all those things are much more likely to happen. In fact, in any and every relationship we have, and as an organization, as a church, we have been given the gift of having our entire strategy for living already laid out for us. One day, Jesus was sitting down with a group of scribes, and scribes were what their name implies. They were writers. Long before the days of copy machines and computers, scribes took old copies of scripture, old manuscripts, and they made new ones by hand. So they became experts on anything and everything that had to do with Jewish law, passed down from generation to generation. And as time went on, Jewish law really expanded. What began as just one of the Ten Commandments, for instance, keep the Sabbath day holy, grew in the book of Leviticus to hundreds of rules and regulations about how to keep the Sabbath day holy. And when you're so deeply enmeshed in material like that, it can become a bit convoluted and confusing just what the whole point of it is. You can get lost in the weeds of the tactics and not be able to understand or see the overall strategy, much less the whole point that that strategy serves. So, a scribe asked Jesus, which law out of that whole constellation of laws mattered the most? And Jesus answers by reciting what is known as the Shema, or the first 10 commandments. First one of the 10 commandments. Basically, God is everything, so love God with everything you've got. The way I understand that commandment is God is in all things and in all people, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. God is flowing in us and around us and through us. God is life itself, so you got to love that. Not that following that commandment is always easy. It's not my first impulse to recognize God, for instance, and the knucklehead who swerved into my lane on the freeway and almost ran me off the road. At that moment, I'm thinking some very different thoughts about that guy. But loving God with all you are is like recognizing and appreciating and being joyful that even that guy who's behaving like a menace to society is still a beloved child of God anyway, no matter what we might think of him in that particular moment. And in seeing him in that way, not only do we no longer assume that he's a malignant pimple on the forehead of society, but that maybe he's dealing with issues that we'll never know about, or he's just made an honest mistake. He didn't mean to run me off the road. So we don't take his bad driving as a personal insult. Instead, we wish him peace. Go with God, my friend. Remembering that God is in that person just as powerfully as God is in you, and that we're all ultimately connected to each other that way, that lowers our blood pressure and our anger and our fear. It allows us to see and be in a situation without that situation ruining our day or poisoning our perspective about others. But then Jesus answers the scribe with another law: love your neighbor as yourself, which is really just an extension of that first most important law. If love God with all you've got is like a glove, then love your neighbor as yourself is like the hand that fits that glove perfectly. Because when our perspective is that God's in all things and in everyone, and you've got to love that concept, then that includes us too. We're loved, each and every one of us. And loving ourselves is not a bad thing. I hope you do truly love yourself, that you love who you are and you love your life. You should. Not because of anything you've accomplished, although if you've written that best-selling mystery romance Cinderella spy novel, then, well, congratulations. That's really awesome. But don't love yourself because you did that, because what if you never did? Would you not love yourself? You should, because God's love is invested in you like crazy either way. So love the love of God that is within you. Love that presence. Love that gift. And, as Jesus says, love that neighbor of yours who almost ran you off the road just as much. Because our neighbors are not just the people driving in the next lane of traffic or who live in the house next door. Our neighbors are also people we've never even met. You might not know their name or anything about them, but love them in the same way that you are loved. Love them, because the alternative is to go through life without a strategy. Love them, because God's in them, and understanding and appreciating and finding joy in that is the whole point of why we are here. It is our mission and our purpose and our cause. It's also our collective strategy as a church. Our goal, our end game, is to love and to welcome everyone, especially those who may have lost or never had the faith that God is in them and that they are valuable and they are loved just as they are. And remember, our tactics are just the details of how we pursue that strategy. And as long as our tactics always look to and serve that strategy, we will be doing the good work together of awakening the reality of God's love in every life. So individually and together, it's a lifetime pursuit. It's the long game, and it never wavers, it never changes. Love God with all we've got, and love everyone, as we know we're loved by God.